The M2 MacBook Air announced back at WWDC is almost here. Pre-orders for the device just opened up, so here are a few things you should probably know before you hit that button. First of all, let's hope you're watching this video right as it comes out. Heavy demand is anticipated for the M2 MacBook Air, so it's very possible it will sell out and be hard to get for a while. If you do order it right on time, the first M2 MacBook Airs will begin to ship out starting on July 15th. Now, the MacBook Air isn't the only way to get an M2 chip. The M2 MacBook Pro launched last month, but that laptop is the exact same design as the previous 13-inch MacBook Pro, with a touch bar and wide bezels around the screen. Meanwhile, the M2 MacBook Air has a slick new design similar in style to the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros, a new FaceTime camera, and some new colors. That 13-inch Pro is hard to recommend thanks to the same chip coming in an updated chassis not long after, but we can get a bit of insight from that launch. One thing worth keeping in mind as you decide what to order is the storage speed. The M2 MacBook Pro switched over from 128GB NAND chips to 256GB NAND chips. While that seems like an upgrade, and it does mean slightly higher storage density, it means that the base level MacBook Pro, with only 256 gigs of storage, is limited in speed to the speed of one NAND chip. That means if you opt to switch from an M1 machine with that same amount of storage, you'll actually be downgrading the speed of your internal storage. Now, that speed is still pretty good, at around 1400 to 1500 megabytes per second, but the M1 could achieve read speeds of almost 3000 megabytes per second. If storage speed is a worry, I would consider upgrading your storage to at least 512 gigabytes. Heck, even if you aren't that worried about speed, I would personally upgrade your storage. 256 gigabytes is not much in a modern computer, and it's very easy to fill that up unless all the work you do is through a web browser, which admittedly it might be. In terms of storage, as I noted previously, the base model comes with 256 gigabytes of SSD storage. That can be upgraded to 512 gigabytes, 1 terabyte, or 2 terabytes, and will cost you $200, $400, or $800 more. So, what are the other parts of the M2 MacBook Air you can configure? Well, you have two CPU options. There's an M2 with an 8-core CPU and an 8-core GPU. That comes in the base model M2 Air that costs $1199. For $100 more, you can upgrade to a 10-core GPU that will net you slightly better GPU performance. The base model also comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM. That can be upgraded to 16 gigabytes for $200 more, or 24 gigabytes for $400 more. That's somewhere that I will definitely upgrade, as 8 gigabytes of RAM is definitely on the low end for a modern computer. You also have the choice between 4 colors: Midnight, Starlight, Space Gray, and Silver. When totally maxed out, you can spend as much as $24.99 on a new M2 MacBook Air. But I wouldn't recommend doing that. That's more than the base model of even the 16-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro, which would definitely run faster. The sweet spot for the M2 Air is probably somewhere in the middle, maybe upgrading the RAM and storage a bit, but definitely not maxing it out. Depending on the exact configuration you go with, it may affect your shipment date, so be aware of that as you go to configure your order if you want it as soon as possible. But there's another option that should definitely be considered, and that's the M1 MacBook Air. The jump in performance from the M1 chip to the M2 chip, while existent, isn't massive, but the jump from older Intel Macs to any Mac with Apple Silicon is considerable. Most people doing general work probably won't notice the difference between M1 and M2. With the M1 MacBook Air starting officially at $999, a whole $200 less than the M2 Air, and still on sale from Apple, it's definitely worth thinking about how much you really need that extra performance and new design. If you'd consider going used, the savings could be even more considerable. Now, one main draw of the M2 over the base model M1 is the improved media engine, so perhaps if you plan to work with video, that'll nudge you towards the M2. What do you think? Are you going to pick up an M2 MacBook Air, or do you plan to wait for a higher performance version of the chip to come? Regardless of what you choose, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Leave this video a like if it helped you out, and subscribe to the channel for more from 9to5Mac.